So Ed, where are we today? What's the story about this piece of land we're on?
Well, we are in Northumberland. We're about 5 miles north of Morpeth or so, between the villages of West Chevington that way and Widrington that way. And we're on the site of what was once a big hole in the ground and is now, as you can see, trees. Well, soon to be trees.
Yeah,
some
trees.
of them just emerging, this willow. Some of them a little bit further on, and a lot of them still to come out. And on this site, that hole in the ground used to be taking up coal. So this is one of the biggest open cast coal mines in the country. Northumberland was covered with them. And today, it's trees for Atom and power for us all. So a new generation looking at the land in a different way, capturing carbon out of the atmosphere, generating electricity in a renewable way, and we're part of that.
And what's this? Quite a big deal for Adam. What's our role here? What have we done? We've bought the land.
We've bought the land, and we've bought all the future carbon credits that are going to be locked up by these trees for the next 80, 100 years of their growth, and that amounts to about 7,000 tonnes of carbon, which we think is about the same amount as our operational emissions over the first 10 years of Atom's life. So we're 10 years old this year, and we've been measuring pretty accurately, basically invoice by invoice, all of our carbon we use in our operations. So that's our travel to work, the stuff we buy, the stuff that some of our suppliers buy on our behalf, and we think that's peaked out at about 600 or 700 tonnes a year. It'll be a lot less when there was just 6 of us in the first few weeks, and then 100, 200, 300, 400 of us. So we think 7,000 tonnes is a fairly conservative approach to saying that we're going to lock up through this woodland all the operational carbon that inevitably we've had to use through buying stuff. There's stuff embedded in all the IT kit that we use. Most of us travel with a combination of diesel or petrol in our fuel tanks. It's just the way of the world at the moment.
Yeah.
Things will change in the future. That economy will be decarbonised, but we have been responsible for putting it into the atmosphere. We should suck it out again.
That seems fair, doesn't it?
I think so.
Yeah. And we're a digital bank. We haven't got branches. I assume that means that we probably emit less carbon than some of the kind of bigger guys around. And where do we stand, and what kind of things are our biggest contributors to our kind of carbon emissions as a bank?
So operational emissions, and we'll come to financed emissions in a minute, but operational emissions, about 30% or so is from the commute. And of course, that's why we introduced the EV policy and gave people a chance to get onto that scheme through Octopus. But it also means that we want to keep producing more reasons for people to travel actively, stay fit, earn those vitality points, but also jump on a train, jump on a bus, car share where you can, and keep pushing down those numbers. But that 30% is of, as I say, about sort of 600 or so tonnes a year, which means that on a per FTE basis, so per head of people on a full-time equivalent basis in the bank, we're about 1.3 tonnes or so of carbon a year. Now, that's pretty good. In fact, that's really darn good. There aren't other businesses in our neck of the woods that are sort of on equivalent in terms of the sector that we operate in.
Okay.
We're really pretty good. We've worked hard to do that. We've been changing all the tariffs that we buy our power and electricity on. We've been looking at how we run the business. We've been paring down on the things that are really significant parts of carbon in our IT system, so that now we use Google. They use just that sort of power. Yeah. We buy kit which can increasingly be renewed in its entirety and recycled in its entirety. So we've been working hard on that. But as I say, it's just one part of what we've now got to look at in terms of carbon. We've got to think about the carbon that we're financing through our bank.
Okay.
So we're a business, we buy stuff, we move around, we buy stuff from other people. That is a sort of 600 or 700 tonnes, 1.3 tonnes or so per head. As I say, we're in the top very few percentages of all companies in the whole of the country in terms of carbon intensity on that basis. But as a bank, we lend money to people to fuel their business, to buy their homes, and as the way that the world now wants us to look at that, we've got to add up the carbon that they use and work out what proportion we're responsible for. So if you've got an 80% LTV mortgage with us, then 80% of everything that you use to heat your home is actually a number that I need to understand and I need to write down now and account for and talk about actively in our annual report and talk about with our board about how we're going to bear down on that. And that's now reflected in how we've designed the scorecard, which reflects on all of us. You know, the bank's performance is the scorecard. And the scorecard says we're going to bear down on the financed emissions from the bank so that for every £1 million that we lend, we reduce the carbon intensity of that by 5% this year. And everybody is getting involved. You know, the commercial team, the risk team, the finance team, ops team, tech team, everyone is engaged in the conversation, but we've got to get right into the heart of our credit policies, into the heart of who we lend to, how we can reduce that carbon intensity so that year on year, and by 2035 when we said we'll be climate positive, which means we'll have reduced the carbon intensity of our lending across our balance sheet, not just to zero but beyond that. You know, so we'll be sucking more carbon out of the atmosphere through our balance sheet than we're responsible for putting into it. That actually we've all got something to be very proud of, and we're taking a market leading position, you know. And I think that's kind of what we designed Atom to be, a market leader, bank for the future. And you can't think about the future without thinking about carbon and the climate. We should go for it.
Because it is quite a lofty ambition, isn't it? Do you want to talk a bit about the ambition and why we've set ourselves a goal that seems a bit higher than what the other guys are trying to get to?
Yeah, it's further and faster. It's further and faster than the UK government has said. You know, so they've gone to net zero by 2050. Mm-hmm. Well, that does mean that there are some things happening which are actually going to help us on that journey. So more of those things, on land, out at sea, will increasingly mean that electricity will be decarbonised. And this new administration, this new government has said by 2030, get the whole grid decarbonised. Now that's you think we're lofty, that really is lofty,
yeah.
You know. But if you don't have ambition and you don't push for something, it's okay to fail so long as you've started the journey and you mean to complete it. I don't think we're going to fail. I don't know if the government's going to fail, but the mere fact that they're going to decarbonise so much of the grid means that as more and more houses become more and more reliant on electricity for their heating and their power, as well as, of course, for light, then we can say, well, we're lending to houses which are in themselves using less carbon, just in their very nature. So you could still stick the thermostat up, but so long as that's coming through an air source heat pump, which is powered by electricity, and the electricity itself is coming from one of these fellas, you know, then we go, well, live comfortably, as long as you can afford it. But for us, you know, that's only part of the journey. Part of the journey is as well to make sure that we're making our balance sheet available to people who want to be part of the decarbonisation journey themselves. So this project here is 10 hectares.
Okay, so relatively small in the grand scheme.
Relatively small, grand scheme of things. We want to do more, and we want to build it up to 1,000 hectares by the end of 2028. So start here, go again, keep pushing, not with a view to putting the commercial success of the bank at risk, far from it.
Okay.
Because there are markets emerging for carbon, but more importantly, there are markets emerging for biodiversity. And that matters to us in a huge way, because now you can't get planning permission for any scheme of any scale, whether that's for residential housing or for commercial property, without proving that you either on the site you're developing, or more likely on an adjacent site, that the biodiversity loss through, which is inevitable through, you know, ploughing up fields, pushing down hedges, pushing down trees, taking away habitat for plants, animals, birds, all of that loss is now going to be compensated by gain somewhere else. You know, the future of housing has been a long discussion in this country. Are we building enough? No. Are we building in the right places? No. Is there impact on communities? Is there impact on the natural environment as a result? Yes. Let's offset that. Let's create gain somewhere else, and let's make sure we're building the houses. And then Atom's job is to lend mortgages to those people and help them fulfil their ambitions.